Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Councilman Jim Waring. Joining me on today's show is Phoenix Fire Chief Mike Duran. Chief Duran, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, I'm really honored to have you here. You've been chief for, almost better part of a year, almost starting in February. We haven't had a chance to do a show with you, and we're really honored to have you here. Obviously, we've talked to your predecessors, and lots going on with the fire department, a lot of changes in technology, a lot of changes in the city of Phoenix. So I want to touch on all those things. But first, I thought viewers would like to get to know you a little better. You have a fascinating family history with Phoenix Fire. Your dad was a firefighter. You've got two brothers on the fire department right now. So you want to talk a little bit about that and how it influenced you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Councilman Waring, for having me on the show today. I appreciate that, and get a chance to sit in front of the viewers here and talk a little bit about myself. And so I've been with the fire department now for over 28 years. I guess took over here as the fire chief in February of this year. My dad is retired executive assistant chief. He retired in 2008 from the fire department after 36 years of service. I have two brothers that are on the fire department right now. Both are about 22 to 23 years of service in the fire department with them. So it's definitely something that's a tradition in our family, and we want to continue that on. Hopefully the next generation of firefighters in our family. As a matter of fact, and I have several nephews and nieces that are looking to do the same. So,
well, that's fantastic. I mean, it's really an inspiring story too. A record of public service, not just one generation of a family, but two, and then potentially more, and multiple family members. We've got police officers like that as well. I know there are other firefighters in the same situation, but I just think it's fantastic. A chief having that kind of institutional history. So working backwards, your dad started in the 70s.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
He started in 1973, and actually I'll even go back a little bit further there, because both my grandfathers worked for the city of Phoenix. One worked in the Parks Department, and one worked in what they called sanitation back then in Public Works. So it's actually I'd be the third generation in the city of Phoenix here.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you came on in the early 90s. Yes. Dad starting in the early 70s. I mean, it must be like a completely different job at this point. I know the responsibilities, but with the technology, the GPS, yes. You want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that you've seen?
Certainly. Yes, and the Phoenix Fire Department's always been innovative, and with the leadership at the time when I came on was Fire Chief Alan Brunacini. Our labor president was Pat Cantelmi, and really the Phoenix Fire Department was known for being innovative, looking at operational fire tactics and strategy, response times. Customer service was what we talked about all the time, and how we could provide better service to the community, and really expanding on our scope of fire, EMS, transportation for the community, operating in special operations, which was technical rescue operations that we see more and more of. Hazardous materials response. We started in the mid-90s working on a program called the Community Response. Well, now it's today the Community Response Program, going out and assisting folks that may need assistance of grief support, or after a fire they needed some support of help with getting connected to social services. As far as the technology, what I've seen and what I think has been most significant for us is the ability to address the health and wellness of our members. When I came on, we had a health center that was already pretty established, but that is continuing to grow, and so we are seeing more and more direct efforts at the wellness and health of our members, from the equipment that we use today, the type of turnouts, our SCBAs, even how we build our fire stations. Even some of our most recent fire stations is where you have different layers as you walk in, to not bring those contaminants into a fire station. Same thing with our fire trucks. You wouldn't think about that, but the contaminants that are inside the fire trucks from us carrying our equipment in there, we try to reduce that and have the ability to clean those surfaces very well. Keep our turnouts outside of the truck after a fire, not bringing those in. So we've really evolved in the fire service, not just in the Phoenix Fire Department, but the fire service across the country, and we are definitely looking at all those best practices here. So just in my 28 years, we've definitely seen a lot, and we advanced in emergency medical services with our heart monitors have changed over time, and being able to have better technology to provide that type of care to the patients. We've expanded in our transportation services with our ambulances over the years, so and we know that's continuing to grow. Obviously, we have our call volume is continuing to grow, and just in the last 10 to 12 years, of what I've seen and being in a manager position is the growth of the city, and how that's having definite impacts on us and the fire service here to meet that demand. But you have a city that's what we see. We look at it from 2014 to now, 300,000 residents have come to the city of Phoenix, which I think is tremendous for us to grow and bring the industry here, and we want to make sure that we're meeting the services of the community.
Yeah, we've been the fastest growing city and the fastest growing county for a while. Obviously, when you have that kind of growth, and we're spread out, we're not a concentrated city, we're a big geographic entity, and so you can have enough firefighters, but if you don't have a place to stage them, that's an issue. That became an issue in my district a few years ago, when we had Station 55 built. I think the turnaround on that might have been, I talked to your predecessor about it, and I think it took about 1.5 years. But I think you guys were staging out of an old hotel, if memory serves, within a few weeks of issues being brought to my attention. And so I really appreciated that. The new fire station, I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of the layers and how it's set up. And that's a great thing, because I think everybody watching at home is going to understand firefighting's a dangerous business, but there were a lot of unseen dangers that maybe weren't thought about back in the 70s or 80s.
Correct.
That kind of came to the fore, and we're trying to help you, with your guidance, we've tried to provide the resources to address those.
Certainly. We truly appreciate the support of the mayor, council, the city of Phoenix, our residents, and understanding and knowing and taking interest in the health and wellness of our members, making sure that we have the right equipment. And I think for us as a fire service, as a fire department, with the funding that we have, we really do leverage that very well and do very well with being able to acquire the equipment. What I like to see for us is a lot of the planning for the future and trying to anticipate those needs for us, and looking at best practice and doing the research out there. And so for me, in my role, my position, I truly promote that with all of our sections and looking at that and addressing that.
Well, I've appreciated the briefings that we've had, that you've shared with me, both public and in my office and private. I appreciate the fact that we're not trying to look at just like, what do we need right this second, right, but what could be helpful for residents and firefighters for the next 20 years. And that goes also to expanding the staffing. I think you used to have more applicants than you do now, but we're still not at a deficit situation like we are with police. That's a different discussion. So I think fire is one of the few areas in the city where we're getting enough applicants to fill the spots. It's just getting them, it's not for everybody. So you can apply, but if you're afraid of heights or don't like fire, maybe it's not the game for you. So you want to talk a little bit about how many people apply, what kind of process. People watching at home might be interested in trying to become a Phoenix firefighter. What do you have to go through? How long does it take to go from sending in that first application to actually getting on a truck and going to a fire?
Certainly. Thank you for that question. And that is one of our initiatives right now, is to really get out to the community and reach out, not just here locally, but across the country, and do recruitment for the Phoenix Fire Department and bringing in the next generation of firefighters. So that's been a focus for us. Our human resources section has a recruitment officer that puts together plans on how we go out and promote and reach out to the community and bring in those recruits and educate them on the process. One of the things that I think is unique about our system is that we have what we call the affinity groups, and there are different makeups within our organization, with Hispanic firefighters, Black firefighters, we have Irish American firefighters in the Valley Women's group. So several of these groups all work together in helping us with our recruitment efforts out in the community, not just, again, here locally, but across the state and nationwide. For someone that's interested, that would like to look into a career with the Phoenix Fire Department, can certainly go to our website that's on the City of Phoenix website, /fire, and look at what the requirements are for us. Right now, we had our last testing process just before the fall, into the summer here. The numbers were a little bit less than what we normally are used to. So what we used to see is maybe 3,000 to 4,000 applicants we're seeing about 1,100 applicants and about 900 plus people taking the actual written test. So we know that we definitely have to have probably more tests here in the future and look at how we continue to plan ahead so that we can make sure we're meeting that demand.
Yep, and police and other industries, big employers around the country are having trouble, getting people to apply and getting the right folks to apply. Sure. That's definitely a challenge. Obviously, we don't let just anybody become a Phoenix firefighter. It's a pretty rigorous, both physical and mental job, and the tests are commensurate with that. So if you get 900 people taking the test, how many would you expect to eventually work for Phoenix Fire?
The way we look at that is based on our attrition rate, obviously in numbers. If we're adding new positions into the system there,
you have to have spots
we'll
open.
Have to have the spots, correct. So we look at all those numbers there. Normally, I would say within this process here, we're probably looking at about anywhere between 100 to 150 positions with this next process, within this next process here. So yeah. But yes, you are right. There's definitely demands on this job here. It's not for everybody. You are, what we look at is we call ourselves an all-hazard system, right? So a firefighter shows up, they're problem solvers. They're folks that are going to show up with the training and the resources to help that person at whatever crisis that might be at that moment in time. A lot of our firefighters come with much experience just, from somewhere else that they bring into our organization. Obviously, firefighting is what we do a lot of the time. Most of our calls evolve around medical services, right? 85% of what we do today in the fire service, fire EMS service, is based around EMS. And then you have your special operations, which is your hazmat, technical rescue, and other areas where folks can gain training and knowledge and become more, expand their roles here in the fire service. So. Also, some of our folks will work on an ambulance for a period of time. As you first come onto the Phoenix Fire Department, we have our own transportation system. We have about 36 ambulances in our system, and we transport very regularly. And so part of the firefighter recruitment upon completion of their probation will be sitting on an ambulance and responding on and transporting people to the hospital. There's still firefighters in our system, but that is part of the role here in the Phoenix Fire Department.
What always strikes me is, the fires are the thing that you're going to see on the evening news. The big fire, warehouse fire, and those are dangerous. And obviously, you guys risk life and limb to put those out. But that's not the bulk of the time spent on the job, I wouldn't imagine. And I assume that's probably changed dramatically since your dad's day in the department, when I assume, you had older buildings, not nearly as many safety features, not nearly as many requirements for builders. And I'm sure there were a lot more fires probably per capita, is my guess, and a lot more firefighter time was taken up with actual fires rather than what you're talking about now, the medical services. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, I would say yes. And for the Phoenix Fire Department, I believe it's because we've evolved more in the medical services. In the mid-'80s, the Phoenix Fire Department, let me go back a little bit, but in the early 70s and mid-'70s, we trained our first 12 paramedics in our system, and the chief at the time.
So prior to the 70s, they didn't even have paramedics.
Didn't have paramedics. We started.
Fun fact for people at home, maybe not fun for the people who are living in the 1960s, but that just shows the change that we're talking about over the last half century.
Yes, most definitely. And so from there, the vision of the Phoenix Fire Department from maybe primarily firefighting really moved into the medical services, and then in the mid-'80s, the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Fire Department moved into transportation services for the community. So then again, that added another resource and layer into our system, and then from there on, we've continued to expand training paramedics within our system, working with community colleges. We have continued to look at the different types of equipment that's coming in. We have a very robust medical services section. We're training right now. We have about 36 paramedics in our system. We'll be training another 36 here in the near future. And our goal is over the next several years to probably train about 400 medics in our system in the next 5 years.
And I was thinking about this question this morning when I was at the gym. A fellow was wearing I think it was paramedic training course or something from Paradise Valley Community College. He was wearing a t-shirt that talked about the program he had clearly been in. Do you have to take those classes to sign up, or is that something that it helps? And if you're interested in this line of work, that's a good place to start. But do we do all the training that you need?
So part of part of the process if someone is applying for our position as a Phoenix firefighter, is you have to be EMT certified, and that is done through the community college. So that's pretty known that the first step is to obtain that, and that's obtaining your EMT certification is definitely a commitment, at the community college level. But that's one of our requirements there. From there, becoming a paramedic, if the person would like, if they're looking to go down that pathway, we certainly here in the city of Phoenix, and with the approval of Mr. Barton, the city manager, we've been able to now offer incentives for those folks that are paramedics of up to $7,500 right now. So if you are a trained paramedic in the system and you test with us and you are hired, and then upon successful completion of your probationary period, you will have that incentive.
Yeah, much the same way that teachers get extra pay for getting master's degree and so forth. Well, that's a good thing to know. And again, for folks watching at home who might be interested in this line of work, we're certainly interested in having you. So we've given you, I think, enough information to know like what you're facing. It's not easy, and it's not for everybody. But as I think your family is living proof, it can certainly be very rewarding. And a different note, you talked about the medical services. Obviously, well, for example, I live on the Scottsdale border. So my understanding with the call centers and the GPS locators and everything, if I'm having a heart attack and there's a Scottsdale truck that happens to be kind of driving down the street, that's the truck that gets sent. You want to talk a little bit about how the resources get divvied up between the cities if you happen to live on a border, and how do we sort all that out at the end of the year?
Sure. Thank you. Yes. What makes us, that is something that's very unique here for the Valley. We call our region, and it's what we call the automatic aid system. Really, that's a makeup of about 24 agencies right now that respond continuously within that boundary there. City boundaries is not something that we necessarily look at. This is about having the right resource, the closest resource available to that call or that incident will be sent. So all of us as fire chiefs all agree to supporting one another and supporting our communities. For one, it provides safer communities as well as firefighter safety. And really that has been the premise of why the automatic aid system was created many years ago. And so we have been operating now for 4 decades in this system, and it has continued to evolve as more cities were coming on board with this. So yes, you could be driving along the border of Phoenix and Scottsdale, and the truck that may show up may say Scottsdale on there, but you are getting the same service. We train regionally. We train even with our medical services and paramedic and EMT trainings. That's consistent across the board. So when we talk about regional consistency, that is what being a part of this automatic aid system is that we are consistent across the board, whether it's firefighting, EMS, special operations. That is all consistent upon we provide service to the community.
And with the goal being to get the person aid as soon as is possible.
Correct.
The more I heard about the system, frankly, the happier I was just as a resident. People always forget my family lives here too. And so, we all have a lot of interest in how we're divvying up resources. So for people at home, I wouldn't be so focused on there's a Phoenix fire department station right up the street from me. It's like, where's the nearest station, even if it's across the street? And when Scottsdale and Phoenix and Glendale and Tempe and all the cities that are adjacent, when they go to build stations, you guys talk amongst each other, correct? To make sure that you're not building them like right across the street from each other or something. That'd be silly given what you just said about the shared resources. So you want to talk about a little bit about how you interact with your peers in the surrounding cities?
Certainly. So what we have what we call as a Central Arizona Life Safety Council, and that's made up of all the fire chiefs here across the valley. Again, 24 agencies that are automatic aid agencies, and then we have another 5 agencies that are added in as part of that system with mutual aid. So what we do is we meet regularly to talk about issues, concerns in regards to the region and the consistency there. What we do is we develop subcommittees within that Life Safety Council to address issues such as resource management and logistics, to look at operations, response, and training, to look at planning and for the future of fire stations and placement of resources. So one of the subcommittees that we have within that structure there does look at region-wide as far as placement of fire stations and future placement of fire stations is we are moving into a bond here. We look at where we're placing those next fire stations. The same for other cities as they're looking at their capital improvement projects is they're building stations, what's the proximity to the next fire station? So a lot of that takes a lot of planning and coordination. I think for the residents, that's placing these resources in the right place. And also for those cities and that city leadership is letting them know that, hey, we are looking at this holistically to make sure that we're placing these resources the most advantageous to the community there.
Yeah, and obviously you touched on it earlier with Phoenix growing as rapidly as it is. We are talking about the placement of new fire stations. For some, we already have properties purchased, correct? And this is going to be a fire station in the future, maybe not tomorrow, but at some point there's going to be development, and we're going to make sure that this fire station is up and ready to go when that time comes. What do you do when you don't have a property and you do have some growth? What then?
That is a great question. You know, for us, what we look at is, well, right now we do have a plan for a 20-year fire station plan and where we'd like to see our resources placed in the future. Obviously, working through either a bond or reoccurring bonds is what our goal and anticipation is to be able to accomplish that. If the land is not available in that location, we'll look at response times to that area there, and we'll take that data from our CAD system to determine where the best location would be. And if it's not that direct location, we'll try to find something within the proximity. Obviously, the availability of land has its challenges right now in the system. One of our stations that we're proposing in the bond in the East Valley, Station 13, there's really not much available land within that location there. So we do work with our community and economic development partners, our planning and development partners to identify locations for land or maybe businesses that may be vacating those areas there to try and place a fire station.
Yeah. Well, so I guess what I take away from that is, given that land can be either we already own it, so that's already a cost that's sort of sunk cost. But if we have to go, compete, it can be pretty expensive. So the cost of a fire station can vary pretty widely depending on how much you have to pay for the property that you're going to be using. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. It is. It all depends upon the location and the availability of that land. Correct. Yes.
Yeah. And then the price of materials, of course, is also skyrocketed for developers everywhere. But really, for our purposes here, the city is a developer trying to build a building. But let's just say, based on prices right now, how much is it to actually build a fire station, assuming you already have the property?
Well, right now, some of our fire stations could be, right now a 4-bay fire station could be anywhere between $15 to $18 million right now, and that's pretty standard for us with a pretty basic fire station with the amenities that we talked about earlier, is having those different layers for the contamination and so forth, and the living amenities for our members to run a
yeah, they got to have a kitchen, beds. They're living there.
Correct.
So yeah, no, it's not a cheap undertaking for anybody who's been in one. It's sort of like a smaller hotel with a parking for a lot of RVs. So I was just in a fire station doing some training for a couple days last week, and it's a big production. And what the needs of your force is, you got to have people living there. They're staging out of there. They got to maintain all the equipment. It's not easy, and it's not something that can be. They got to have shower facilities. It's just something that until you really start to sit down and think about it, it's not easy to just throw up a fire station.
It's not. There's a lot of planning that goes into this, and we've building Fire Station 55 there off of I-17. We try to build a station that.
And you had that property already, if I remember.
We had that
so
property.
That made it a little
prior,
bit easier.
Correct,
lift,
it did, which we were able to really move that fire station pretty quickly, and that a lot also was the help of our partners from the Streets Department and other city departments there. But we try to adopt a piece of property that fits within the neighborhood, so the architecture and design of that fire station fits within that neighborhood, so that we want to be a community partner. We want to be a part of the neighborhood, and so that's usually the consideration that our design team takes with these new fire stations. For us today, what we're looking at is for when we build a fire station is we're building something for the future. We hope to have a fire station for the next 30, 40, 50 years. So when we build a station It may seem large at the time, but we anticipate in the future that there may be more resources and more personnel in those fire stations. So we don't want to shortcut ourselves today for something that we may need in the future. Unfortunately, we have stations that are 60 years old that were built for that time and that era. Two-bay fire station, which you've seen, some of the smaller fire stations that may be 2,000 square feet, and that sounds like a lot, but in our system, that's pretty small for us. So there's no ability to expand and put more resources in those fire stations.
Yeah, if it's surrounded by neighborhood, there's only so much you can do. And something built in the 60s, and we touched on it earlier, a lot of kind of the job that you're doing has changed pretty dramatically in those 50 or 60 years too. So, that the facility that was built, well-intentioned facility maybe held up for 40 or 50 of those years. Now it's got to be wired up for GPS and bigger trucks, and it's just crazy how much different things are now for those stations, and the fact that they're even serviceable at this point are pretty amazing. Although I know you're also talking about having to rebuild some of them because they're just older buildings.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of our busier fire stations are those smaller
older buildings, yeah.
two-bay red brick fire stations. And although someone who grew up in the fire department, I love the history and the tradition of those fire stations. But obviously, for us, the ability for us to expand and put more resources in those areas where we know we're very busy, we have to look at building new stations in those areas. What we're proposing in this bond is to keep those older fire stations and repurpose them for other resources like our community assistance program.
And it just probably stands to reason that older fire stations are surrounded by older buildings that are less likely or probably more likely to have a fire, potentially anyway. So it is sort of something that needs to be addressed in pretty short order. What's the busiest fire station?
Right now, the busiest fire station is Fire Station 7 off of 3rd Street and Hatcher there. I myself have worked there early in my career. It's been one of our busiest stations pretty consistently. They run about, they're going to run about 6,000 calls in a one-year time frame, which is very high in the activity level for a fire company, and I say a paramedic fire company. So right now, what we're looking at is that would be our number one priority, and our bond is rebuilding Fire Station 7 to add more resources to that, repurpose that fire station for the community assistance program. And one of the things that we learned, and me as fire chief are looking at is when that unit is on a call, the amount of units and resources that are coming in to cover that area. And what we found out is about 26% of the time of those calls are being covered by other resources because that unit, Engine 7, is already on another call. Yeah. So pretty significant for us and how it has impact on our system.
Well, Chief, you got a huge responsibility. I wish we had more time. I hope our viewers were as fascinated as I was, but I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you. And if you have any questions or comments, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website, Phoenix.gov/District 2. We look forward to seeing you next time on The Issues.